Thank you everyone for joining this ACRL Access Services Interest Group 2019 Fall Virtual Forum 2. This is our second for the fall semester. We'll have 2 in the spring. I'm Sue Garrison, Access Services Manager from Rice University. And joining me today, monitoring our chat window, will be Derek Dolby, who is the Coordinator and Circulation and Reserve Services at the University of Delaware. Please note that this is a safe environment and whatever is shared with the group will be kept anonymous. So any of your chat messages or anything that you want to share with the presenters will be kept anonymous. And we would hope that all participants will respect these rules and not share out information from this session. Today's session focuses on better serving our library patrons experiencing homelessness and trauma. Our presenters today are Dayra Gonzalez, Senior Library Specialist at Houston Public Library, and Agnes Ho, Director of Student Wellbeing at Rice University. Dayra has nearly 5 years of experience working for nonprofits, providing assistance to marginalized populations. And at Houston Public, she has created a library outreach program for Houston's homeless population, offering one-on-one assistance with resource and referral information, as well as opportunities for personal enrichment and well-being. She's a native Houstonian and first-gen college graduate. Agnes is a licensed master-level social worker with more than 15 years of experience working in public and nonprofit settings, providing counseling, outreach services, professional training, and supervised child abuse and domestic violence prevention programs to support family health and well-being. And without further ado, I'll turn the presentation to Dayra and Agnes. Thank you both.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'll go ahead and start. As I said, my name is Dayra Gonzalez, and I work for the Houston Public Library at the Central Library in downtown Houston, Texas. Just a little background for those of you that may not be aware, Houston is one of the largest, most diverse cities in the country. And although there have been improvements in getting people experiencing homelessness off the streets and into housing, there is still a lot of work to do. And as a result, the library downtown sees hundreds of these folks every day. So I was hired in 2017 to try and figure out how the library could best serve these customers. So I'm always happy to connect with professionals such as Agnes, and I'm just super excited to share my experiences and some of what I've learned with you all today.
And welcome everyone. My name is Agnes Ho. I am a licensed social worker here in Houston, Texas. And I'm also the director of the Student Wellbeing Office at Rice University. And I'm very excited about to give this webinar together with Dayra today, because when we were preparing this presentation, we learned a lot about of each other, how we work in our settings. And I'm very excited to also learn there's actually social workers working in public library settings, which is very, very neat. And hopefully today we can share with you all some more information, the approach and the best practices that we use when we work with a customer, if they experience homelessness and also in particular traumatic stress. So we hope you enjoy our presentations. And again, from this presentation, we would love to bring you a couple of informations. Very importantly, we want to talk about the trauma piece. We hope everyone will be able to understand how trauma and then the basic of the trauma response and what makes the homeless population do experience a lot of traumatic events and what are the effects on that. And also we will talk about the trauma-informed practice approach, because a lot of research and studies showing that the trauma-informed practice do have a lot of benefits, especially when we work with our customer experiencing homelessness or any other traumatic events happen. And then at the end, we would love to share some more practical skills, and we do have some scenarios to go through. Hopefully we bring all these theory and also the practical skills together and share obviously our experience with you all. And at the same time, please make use of the chat box and let us know if you have any questions, and we will be happy to answer all those questions when we are finished our presentation.
Okay, so we wanted to start with just a basic, very broad overview of the homeless situation in the country. This information was put out by the White House Council of Economic Advisors. And as you can see, over 500,000 people go homeless on any single night in the United States. And homelessness almost always involves people facing just desperate situations and extreme hardship. And that seems kind of obvious, right? But they also are, just looking at the fact that they're very limited in their options, and there's untreated mental illness and substance abuse disorders. And what I really appreciated about this report is that they included not only some of the more well-known factors, but also some of those systemic factors that are rooted in racism and bias, and that manifest themselves in the form of well-intentioned policies that actually end up hurting and traumatizing people further. So as you can see, there is a need for improved policies that address some of these problems, because we're working with some of the most vulnerable. So I think that's where the library as an institution comes into play. I know the library is not always the first thing that comes to most people's minds when we're talking about homelessness. I know when I first started, I didn't know the extent that these issues play out in the day-to-day life of library staff, but let's just say I caught on quick. So anyway, now more than ever, libraries are starting to do more, starting to move away from the idea of equal access for everyone, which again sounds good, and towards equitable access for everyone. Just taking that next extra step to make sure that they're actually actively working to address these issues. And I just wanted to include these statements here from the American Library Association, just to further the idea that yes, this is absolutely a part of our job and we are going to address it. So I'll let you guys read that. It's a lot of text. So just to summarize, there's so much to be said about this topic, and there's a ton of work being done by libraries all over the country. But today, bottom line, we're really focusing on one, just accepting that experiencing homelessness is traumatic, acknowledging that these people, as well as people who are housed, there's studies out there that show that a certain percentage of the adult population and teens and younger folks also experience trauma, and these people are in your library more than likely. They're probably in there every single day. So they're bringing that with them when they walk through your doors. And the good news is that you can do something about it. So while we cannot solve all of the underlying issues that lead to homelessness and trauma, we can make sure that we're at least not contributing to it. And we can and should work towards practices that reduce harm for everyone. So with that, I will turn it over to Agnes.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure everyone can hear me in case, because I saw there's a comment about my mic got covered up. So please let me know if you don't hear me, and I can, hopefully everyone can hear me right now. So we would like to take a moment just to think about why do we need to learn about trauma-informed practice approach? Is it because like in your library setting, you also like do experience some customer, they might present in a way that very disoriented, or maybe it seems like they may even tell you, right, their past history experiencing trauma. And then, wow, it would be great for me to learn how to approach it. And then, why does trauma matter, right? It's already the past, why we really need to deal with it. And if I know the customer, right, maybe they experienced some traumatic events in the past, what can I do about it? How are our customer and patrons be able to benefit from a trauma-informed approach that we are using? So that will be really good questions for everyone to think about it right now. Of course, we don't expect you to have an answer right now, and we hope by the end of the presentation, you will be able to get some insights. And we also will give you a lot of like resources, website, link, article to look into more about the trauma-informed practice approach, way to understand more about like patrons if they experience homelessness and trauma. So there's also a lot of research that you can do after this presentation. And again, let us know if you have any questions throughout the webinar. So of course, the first question is, what is trauma? I put this like slide and the background have a lot of like MRI brain images, because like trauma really have a strongly correlation to our brain and talk about our reaction in the brain. And really there's like decades and decades of work in the field of trauma, and there's like multiple different definitions of trauma. So today, I use the definition by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. So they generate this definition with 3 E's. As you see, I highlighted in red. The first E is about the event. So it could be a single event, which could be, for example, it could be like a car accident. It could be, like hurricane or like flood, like earthquakes, like those nature disaster. Sometimes it could be like multiple events happen one after the other, right? It could be medical related. It could be like interpersonal, relationship related. It could be like a set of different situation. For example, like it could be like domestic violence relationship. It could be like there might be some child abuse history. Or it could be like a traumatic loss or death of a loved one. When we talk about loss, yes, it could be, about a death, but also sometimes when we hear people say like a breakup, right, or maybe a divorce, maybe this is like a very traumatic like separation. That could be kind of like the event that could create an impact on a person. And then the second E is about the experience by that individual. The experience that are very emotionally painful and create a lot of distress and very overwhelming to a point that it affects the person's ability to cope. And then the last E is about the effects of trauma. And it definitely creating a lasting efforts effect on the individual. And then the effect is like, not only about like emotion, not only about like mentally, but then all different areas. So that could be, even we were talking about like physical health, there are a lot of like physical health symptoms might be happening at the same time. And when we talk about those effects, we will talk more about this in the next couple of slides. And it affects a lot of different weight on us. And we know it also creates a lot of stress. And then this is the stress that it's just not the normal stress that we deal with every day, but we are talking about the traumatic stress. And again, the concept of traumatic stress emerged in the field of mental health at least like 4 decades ago. And there's a lot of research and clinical studies, including, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network and the organization that I quote right here, the National Center on Family Homelessness. There's a lot of like studies on traumatic stress, and also find out the correlation between homelessness and trauma in general. As you could imagine, when you're being on the streets and living on the street, there's a lot of things happen over there. Not only about like the nature, right, the natural disaster, the weather, everything thing that you need to deal with on the street. But also there's a lot of like history of trauma that individual might be dealing with. Maybe like individual might be like a veteran, right? Like maybe exposed to a lot of like things in a war zone. Or maybe like individual might have a lot of abusive history when they were in when they are in their childhood, or maybe like in a domestic violence relationship. And then on top of that, they also need to deal with a lot of things like on the streets, figuring out where they need to stay, whether or not like, they might, safety might not even their first priority. They just need to like, come up a way to find things to eat, to stay, all those basic needs. So those could be very traumatic and overwhelming. And then, all these traumatic stress create a lot of like reaction in our body, it to a point that it becomes a threat to our mind and body and overall well-being. And then the individual will feel very vulnerable, and to a point that they would not be even able to function and be able to manage, right, to hold a job or to even like maintain in a relationship. When we talk about more about like trauma and then the effect of the trauma, we have to also talk about the brain. And again, trauma and brain, there's a strongly correlated to that. And if we talk about like trauma at the moment, our brain actually react in a way that try to protect us when we are experiencing a traumatic event. And our brain to help us by pounding like chemicals into our body so that we can be prepared to fight for the trauma experience. You might be already heard about, right, fight or flight, right, when we are in a situation that maybe we are shocked, or maybe like there's things happen, our body might either fight or flight, might leave the situation. And in fact, there's also another F, the third F, which is freeze. Sometimes, right, the reaction might be we just like freeze at that moment. Our brain just like pause at that moment, and we couldn't even react, even though we know we need to do something about that. But again, at that moment, our biological response, react to a way that help us to fight or flight about like the situation. And then like our brain triggers the body to release all these stress hormones to give the body the energy to respond. And sometimes there's some part of our brain might also shut down as well. That's the reason why the freeze situation happen. We might have a hormonal flood, and then we might shut down at the moment. So those are the effects like at the moment when we are experiencing trauma at the moment. And that after that, there's also a lot of like aftermath. There's also a lot of effect, after the trauma. All we know is there's a multiple things might have a big impact on us. For example, when we talk about attachment, you might see sometimes like patrons, they might have a difficult time to follow rules, to follow boundaries, and it's because of the effect of the trauma. There's a difficulties or even having trouble with relationships, difficulties to follow rules and boundaries. They might not be able to empathize, right, and understand what the other person's think or feel about. They might even like want to be isolated, socially isolated themselves. And then the other effect is like behavioral control. There's a lot of like difficulty to control their impulses and the behavior. They might have some very aggressive behavior might present. And also, it affects their sleeping and eating patterns. So that would be happen as well. For the cognitive ability, for sure, there's like, problems with focus, to learn new information or to even process the new information. Sometimes you might be wonder, right? When you talk to your patrons, you think, you might give very clear direction, but but maybe it seems like they didn't get it, right? They might, you know, just pause right there and stare at you and look at you. Um, and that also kind of like a reaction of like their previous trauma, and they have no an orientation and a sense of time and space. They might not really, you know, be able to articulate right in a conversation. And then there's some disassociation as well, including memory loss. They might not tend to be conscious, right? When you talk to them, they might not remember the things that you just told them, like maybe a minute ago. So that could happen. The other one is the emotional regulation. A lot of the time, you know, people might experience difficulty to identify or even label their feelings, and they would not be able to communicate about what exactly they need. Mental health, this is a big one, which I do help a lot of clients to work on their mental health while they are experiencing trauma, and then also dealing with the aftermath of that. So from a clinical standpoint, we know those emotions are not only like a normal emotion, normal mental health emotions. We're not only talking about unable to concentrate or feeling sad or having trouble, but we are also talking about that could be a diagnosis of a trauma-related mental disorder. Probably you might heard about like the most common diagnosis associated with trauma are PTSD, which is the post-traumatic stress disorder, and the acute stress disorder. And all of these disorders could be also associated with an onset of other mental disorder. That could be substance use disorder, mood disorders, or different types of like anxiety disorder, and also personality disorder as well. So all these symptoms, maybe the patients might have already pre-existing disorders, or maybe because of the trauma, it again, you know, it could be the onset of all different kinds of like diagnosis could be happen. For the physical health, we know a lot of like, you know, clients, they might also experiencing a lot of pain or migraine, and also it affect their mobility, right? Their sensory motor development, their coordination problems. There's like maybe like all different kinds of like physical health symptoms might present. Self-concept, there's another one. There might be a lack of consistent sense of self, their body image issues, very low self-esteem, and then there's a huge amount of shame and guilt. And again, it's really difficult for them to articulate and be able to communicate with that. And then the last one is triggers and flashbacks. There's a lot of like different things that you might not even imagine, right? Not only the sounds or the smells, but then, you know, maybe the touch, right? That's the reason why when we interact with like clients who might experience trauma, we really need to be sensitive about like our interaction with them. Maybe we want to do a handshake, right? But sometimes even a handshake or like, you know, a little touch or a little hug might traumatize the clients. Maybe because they might be in a domestic violence relationship or like in a sexual violence relationship. Every single time when someone touched them, that would be very triggering. It could be like, you know, sometimes it could be the anniversaries. Maybe this is the birthday of someone that they lost. Maybe this is the anniversary of their, you know, the time that they experienced this trauma. That could make a huge impact as well. So those are the very common effects of trauma. And that's the reason why it's very important for us when we work with customer who may experiencing homelessness and also like trauma. We would like to promote to use this, what we call trauma-informed practice. And keep that in mind, this is not like a clinical practice. You don't need to have a license to use this. This is what we are talking about. It's an approach. How are we going to engage with customer who may have experienced trauma in the past? And it's really trying to understand what trauma is, and how can we, you know, like how the way that we understand trauma, so we are not going to victimize, right, the customer or re-traumatize the customer. It's really about like shifting the culture, shifting our perception, shifting the way that we approach, you know, the situation, we approach the customer who might sometimes present some behavior that might not be very appropriate, but because we understand the background, because we understand where they are coming from, our reaction and the approach that we use could be a little bit different. And that might, when we say we are using trauma-informed practice approach, that might not mean the patrons will change their behavior right away. It doesn't mean the patrons will be happy when you ask them to leave the library because of their certain rules that they broke. But again, because the patrons will be able to know exactly what happened. But for you, when you interact with your customer, you as a librarian, you do understand, you do well informed about maybe like, yeah, this customer do experience certain types of trauma in the past, so I am able to be more sensitive when I, you know, react, when I interact with the customer, so I'm not going to be like very much like overreact to the situation. So again, you know, when we talk about trauma-informed practice approach, it's really is an approach, and it's really for us to think about a little bit more about the way that we interact with our customers. And I would say in the last couple of years, I've been hearing more and more professionals, not only social workers, not only clinician or counselors, using trauma-informed practice approach. I even learned recently, even in dental schools nowadays, they do talk about trauma-informed practice, because if you could imagine sitting on the dentist chair, it could be very, you know, traumatized and also very very like scary. So for the dentist, be able to understand where their clients are coming from, and be able to inform the clients about, okay, this is the things that I'm going to use right now. I'm going to let you know step by step, and then check in with the clients often and regularly. And that this is exactly what we call about like trauma-informed practice. So again, you know, to make it very simple to say, instead of like asking the customer about, okay, what's wrong with you, right? We want to shift the approach to not to say that, but instead we really want to know like what has happened to you. And again, you know, the customer might not be ready to tell you everything, but simply by you to approach like this, it would just like, you know, help the patrons to understand, okay, I am being respected. I am being like, you know, you treat me as a human being. You treat me with respect and dignity. Okay, even though, yeah, maybe I need to leave the library, but then I know I'm welcome to be back the next day. And then there's like a couple more things about what to do and how to use the trauma-informed approach practice. And again, you know, it's gonna be an ongoing learning curve for all of us to learn about trauma and trauma awareness, and try to understand what are the effects of trauma, and really also recognize the trauma-related symptoms and the behavior associated with the traumatic experience. Just like, you know, what I mentioned, you know, all the effects of trauma, right? Understanding the behavior, the things underneath those behaviors would be very helpful. And also minimize, right, the risk of re-traumatize the customer, maybe like things that we say, or maybe like, you know, the environment, or maybe like the time, maybe the smells. Yes, of course, sometimes we don't know everything, right, the customer experienced in the past, but then, you know, if they are, you know, telling you a piece, you know, a couple pieces of information, try to be sensitive about that. And then respect in a way that, yes, you know, this is still a safe place. This is still a welcoming environment for the patrons to come and visit. and really support their control and choice and autonomy if they are not breaking the rules in the library, right? Like, they do, know what they need to do, and if they want to just like, sit there and, like do work on the computer, or if they want to like, sometimes talk to themselves, as long as like they're not like breaking the rules or like, disturbing another customers, yeah, that might be something that they are allowed to do, and then we respect that. And then when we get to interact with them, when we get to talk to them, and making sure like we use the strengths-based and person-first language, which is very important, because sometimes, we might have good intention, right, to talk to them, but then the words that we say might be very hurting. So what does it mean by strength-based and person-first language is, for example, when we interact with the patient, with the patrons, maybe like experience some mental health condition, we will use the first person language by saying, it seems like you're having, or you're diagnosed with anxiety. How can I help you with that? Okay, instead of like saying, okay, you are mentally ill, or you are borderline, right? So that would be very inappropriate to say. And again, we want to create that like welcoming and respect, the individual who experience certain types of like disabilities and trauma. And then the last one is like, we also need to familiarize with all the resources available, if not all, at least one resources available in your community, just in case you will need to refer your patrons to, like organization that they practice trauma-informed services. And I'm sure like Dayra will talk a little bit more about that, how we can do that. We are very fortunate. We are in a big city in the Houston area. There's a lot of like homeless shelters and nonprofit organizations in the area to work with patrons who might experiencing homeless and trauma. And by connecting them, even though they might not be ready, but they deserve, right, to get all these services, and they deserve to know about all these services as well. So making sure like also familiar with those resources in your area. And now I'm going to turn it to Dayra to talk more about some practical skills, and based on her experience in a public library setting, how can she use all these like trauma-informed practice approach in her daily work in the library?
Yes, thank you, Agnes. Thank you for that great overview, by the way. So now that we know more about trauma and what it can look like, you may be thinking, wow, this is a lot to take on. I'm just a library staff member. This is more than I signed up for. But I promise you that it's actually not that hard. It can get embedded into the work that we do every day. And I find that you'll eventually find yourself happier to be at work and to be dealing with these issues. You'll be more comfortable with it. So it's definitely a process. But I think we can get started with some practical tips. So where can we start? Well, okay, first of all, here's a great first step, taking this training. I'm so excited that you're all here and taking this webinar right now. And I encourage you guys to continue seeking out training. I may be biased. I love training. I just can't get enough of it. And one thing I've learned and found working at the library too is that library staff tend to really like training too. I think we all appreciate getting more tools in our tool belt to be able to use and diffuse situations and do all that we do in the library every day. So so as far as trainings, you can get facilitated trainings. You can seek out organizations that can do, for example, maybe a more in-depth trauma-informed training in person. Certain organizations offer mental health first aid, which teaches staff some mental health basics and how to respond in the event of a crisis. Also, for example, your local shelter may provide a homelessness 101 training, or maybe at least has the data to help you develop one, just so you can take a look at your own situation wherever you are and get to know your community and what are the needs of your community. So whether it's outsourced or self-paced, it's definitely something that I recommend, is just to get more training. And working with these organizations is not only good for training, but it's also you're letting them know that there's a common goal between you. This way they know, hey, my people that I see every day are also over at the library, and maybe there's a connection there so that we can work together to better serve these people. And it's also a potential for partnerships, so that you can get together. And for example, we have a case manager from a local homeless provider that visits with people on a biweekly basis to enroll them in their mental health program. So sometimes these organizations don't have staff to spare, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And maybe in return, you can provide their staff a training on what resources are available at the library for their customers. There's probably a lot that they don't know about what your library has to offer. So there's so much potential for collaboration, and I invite you to explore that. Another great thing I've learned about library staff is that we love to share knowledge for free. So even if facilitated training and outsourcing training is not an option for your library, you can definitely take matters into your own hands and learn about this topic through archived webinars, articles, books. And I encourage managers and supervisors to allow time for staff to view these and, give credit accordingly, because it is such an important topic. And I was lucky to be able to spend a lot of time learning on my own when I first got here. And I think that it's something that everybody can do. So let me see here. Yes, here we go. So here are some of my go-to training resources. So if you've never heard this top one here, I almost forgot to include him. I can't believe it. If you've never heard of Ryan Dowd, he is a homeless expert. He's run a homeless shelter in Illinois for years. And if that wasn't enough on his plate, he now also travels the world giving trainings to libraries and other organizations that work closely with homeless populations. And his big thing is empathy-driven enforcement. And it's a really great approach. I loved his book and all his trainings. Honestly, cannot recommend it enough. He also has a system that lets you, he has a training, like a full training online. You do have to purchase it for your library, but he does have a system set up in place so that one person can try it and decide if it's right for you before purchasing a license. And just as a freebie, if that's also not an option for your library, you can sign up on his website to get weekly tips in your email. And I do not get paid by him at all, but I'm just so glad he's doing this work, and I really hope you'll check it out. The second link in here from PLA is a page that lists articles, webinars, and other things like that. They actually have a great 2-hour trauma-informed training if you're still itching for more after today. They also have a social work interest group where you can interact with and ask questions to real life social workers that are employed in a library setting. So I won't go over all of these. The lists will be included in the PowerPoint slides that will be shared with everyone. But just real quick down here at the bottom, MHA, Mental Health America, and NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, are two organizations that provide mental health first aid training. And we have worked with them successfully in the past, and they have some local chapters. So I encourage you to look into that. So the next thing I want to talk about is building relationships. We've already talked a lot about doing that with service providers, but equally, if not more important, is the relationships that you build with your customers. And a lot of this may seem obvious, but it's so important to stay conscious and make sure that we're actively doing these things every day. From very simple things such as saying hello to people as they walk in the door. And I put on here, think 5-star hotel, because sometimes I think we can get in the routine of like, hello, welcome to the library. And that doesn't make anybody feel good. At that point, why even say it? So just really treat them like you're happy to see them when they're first walking in that door, and that'll help set that really good first impression. Also, just talking to people throughout the day, just saying, hey, how are you doing? Flashing a smile. getting to know people's names. I know I'm not great with names, so I definitely have to work at it. So, you know, work at it if you can. It's not just say, oh, well, I'm not good at names, I'm never going to know anybody's name. You can definitely work at it, and it's going to be worth it. Because all of this goes back to creating that welcoming environment, making people feel safe and wanted. I mean, it's everything. I've had people just come alive after I said hello with a smile on my face, and people tell me things like, you know, that's the nicest anyone's been to me in a long time. And it's enough to break your heart, but it just goes to show how much these kinds of changes can mean to your customers. Um, it's also important because if we're going to be able to address changes in behavior and notice when somebody's having a bad day, or being able to intervene in times of crisis, it's hard to do that. You can't really help someone if you don't see them, right? And they know that you don't see them. So just laying that foundation is super important, because people will behave more kindly towards you and your library if they feel like they know you, and there's mutual respect. Um, and just as a bonus, it's also probably, I don't have the exact science on this, but I'm pretty sure that when you build relationships with people, it will lead to less incidents, because people tend to um, stand up for the library and for, you know, rules within reason, when they know that there's a reason for them, and you're not just arbitrarily kicking people out of the library and being mean. When there's like a mutual understanding, you tend to have less incidents. So yes, let's move on, please. So lastly, these are some housekeeping items, really. You want to make sure that you arm yourself with resources. We keep a binder of some of the most requested resource information, like where to get a meal, where to take a shower, where you can get free legal aid, websites, phone numbers, all that kind of stuff. We have that ready to hand out. And it's really important also to keep it updated, because that in itself can also be traumatizing when you give somebody an out-of-date resource and they're calling these numbers and seeking help and being told that it doesn't exist anymore, or that that's the wrong number. All of it can really be overwhelming. So I personally call places individually to make sure that they're still doing what the service is that's listed. But I know that's a lot. So if just at least having the information, um, and having it either on hand or on display for people to take, it just shows that you care. So I would definitely recommend figuring out a way to do that, and a way that works for your library, where you guys can have that and have it ready to go. You also want to make sure that your library has a policy in place. So whether it's formal or informal, we really need to make sure that all staff know that they are expected to compassionately enforce rules. And we also shouldn't be too hard on the staff that don't get it right away, right? So I'm not saying that everybody's got to get on board right away. It's complicated and it's difficult for a lot of people. There's a lot of ingrained biases that we have. But we have to start to do the work to break those things down. So making sure that everybody's on the same page is really important. You also want to know who to call and when to call. For example, do you have security? Are you going to call a police officer right away? Maybe you need to find out if you can request a mental health trained officer. For example, we have a crisis intervention team here in Houston, and they come out in an unmarked car, and they're trained to deal with mental health crisis situations. So we know, okay, if it's this kind of situation, then we need to call this kind of officer, and we have that number. And also, when do you call? Do you escalate it to that point immediately, or do you wait until there's a clear danger? And who is allowed to call? Can any staff member make that call? Are they comfortable doing that? All of these questions are good to consider when you're figuring out what works best for your library. And in the end, it'll be much easier to handle situations when you know what to do. And this last thing here, consider debriefing with incidents. After incidents with an error form. An error form is an after incident report form. And that basically, it's more for managers and supervisors because it involves sitting down with an employee and looking at everything that went right and what can be done better maybe next time. But really, any staff member can take time to debrief kind of internally. And I challenge you to look at the situation, what just occurred from a trauma-informed lens to see how you can improve in your interactions with folks so that maybe next time we handle it a little bit better. Okay, so I think we're ready for scenarios.
Yes, so before we go to talk about some scenarios and hopefully we can apply some of those practical skills in these two scenarios, I would encourage everyone to post questions in the chat box, and then we would love to answer your questions after we talked about the scenarios. So let's see, the first one. Dayra, would you like to share with us? Because I know these two scenarios are actually like real scenarios, right?
Yes, yes,
So it would
sure.
be great if you can share with us like some of the best practices from your experience. How did you do? How did you manage it?
Absolutely. So these two situations, they both happened at my library, and I will be the first to say that we probably didn't handle things the best, but we are learning because we're all learning, and there isn't necessarily a right answer here, but I'm curious to see how we can apply everything that we've learned to the situations. So in scenario one, a customer is using the scanner and seems to be agitated. They're frantically sorting through a stack of papers and saying to themselves, "Why do you always do this to me? No, I'm not going to do that. Shut up." Someone else is in line waiting to use the scanner and is becoming impatient. So I really wanted to include this one because it's something I personally struggled with whenever I would see a person that's talking to themselves. I don't know if I was just worried about saying the wrong thing or what, but I would just tend to avoid them. I talked to someone from Mental Health America and they helped me kind of change my perspective. She told me, well, try to think about it like this. How would you treat someone if you saw that they had a broken leg? Maybe you would hold the door open for them, be more patient, but you probably wouldn't just avoid them, right? And that just like blew my mind. So while this may seem like a potentially awkward situation, just remember that there's nothing to be afraid of. And in this situation, I would simply approach the person that's talking to themselves and say something like, "I'm so sorry, but someone else needs to use the scanner. Would you mind working for just a couple more minutes and then giving them a turn?" And here we're giving them a choice. So we're not telling them what to do. We're also not being judgmental and implying that what they're doing is less important than the person waiting. Um, and also just being very straightforward, keeping calm and cool makes the other customer that's waiting in line, makes them feel safe too. Um,
And I think, like Dayra, you mentioned a very good point. Like working with homeless population, it's very important to let them know that they exist and they,
mhm.
they are present too. So even like acknowledging that, yeah, I noticed that, maybe there is some, challenging that you're having right now. Can I help you with that? Is it something that, we can step in and help you with that?
Absolutely.
So by like acknowledging that, right, they are here and it seems like they're struggling and it's okay to, get some more help. I think that makes a whole lot different instead of
Mhm.
just like telling the customer to like, okay, you need to step out, you stand here for a while, like you're
Yeah,
wasting people
exactly.
time, right? Yeah, so again, right, the approach, right, the way that you react, it makes a whole lot different.
Mhm.
And then another one. So this one is about like there might be some potential safety, right, concern. Let's say one of your regulars customer has gone to the restroom and start to cry very loud, like everyone could hear that from the outside. And what all you can hear is like it seems like they have just broken up and with their significant other. So there's some loss and separation there. And then you hear them to say, "I am seriously going to kill myself." So, Dayra, what did you do in those situations?
Well, in this scenario, we were lucky that we actually had an outreach person from a mental health authority that happened to be at a program at our library that day. So the customer that heard it actually went and told her, and she made the call to the crisis intervention team. So that's how we handled it. So I know that that is very lucky and not everybody has that in their library. So I think we can explore maybe some options for how you might be able to handle this. Of course, this again is another reason why you should have a policy in place for these types of things. And maybe uh, I was discussing with Agnes before, you know, what really is the best way that to handle this, and she mentioned that maybe not everybody might be comfortable going into the restroom with this person. So maybe getting a second person to go with you, and asking the question, do you need us to call somebody? Um, and then taking it from there. So I think on this one, there's really a couple of different ways to handle it. You could, of course, if it's very uncomfortable and you just feel like this person is in danger, you can also just go straight to the calling a crisis intervention team, and letting the professional handle it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that either.
Yeah, and it's this one is tricky too because like it happened behind a closed door, right? Like you don't know, you don't have a lot of baseline information, you don't have a lot of data, what's going on in the room with the customer. So again, right, like trust your gut in terms of like safety. I mean, it's okay, right, to knock on the door and say like I hear something inside, like is it everything okay? Is it okay for me to come in and check in to help, right? And
Hmm.
again, right, like if the situation might not be appropriate to a point that you know you think there might be a need to have immediate assistant, right, from your security, or you know if there's a mental health crisis team available, that might be a way to intervene as well. Yeah, sometimes yes, you know, customer might say something, right, that they don't mean it, but every time when someone says something about like hurting themselves or kill themselves, we don't want to minimize it. We
Hmm.
want to like you know really treat this seriously, and then we also need to, right, like tell the customer, I hear about like you just mentioned you're going to kill yourself, I'm worried about you, and I want you to get some more help. There's always like different solutions and there's always different way to feel better. So by offering that solution and hope in just that one conversation, I think like you know again, you know, it might not solve everything, it might not change the behavior right away, but again, you know, it open it up, and it's also like give the customer like knowing that okay, someone acknowledging me, someone know that I'm existing, someone do talk to me, someone seems to care about me, and again, right, that make a whole lot different.
Absolutely.
Yes, so these are everything that we prepare for you all for today. And of course, and you please feel free to post questions in the chat box. And also these our email addresses. Please feel free to email us if you want to ask more questions or you want to learn more. We would be happy to respond emails or talk to you over the phone for more conversation.
Hmm.
And then we put some references, the information, the research, the article that we used throughout this presentation in the PowerPoint. And again, we will share with you the PowerPoint at the end. And feel free to explore more information about working with homelessness and also like working with like people in general, like, you know, if they experience any traumatic stress, and at the same time like how to use trauma-informed approach in your practice.
Hi, Agnes and Dayra. This is Derek. We do have a question. The question is, how do you manage patrons who, as you gain their trust to help them, get attached to you and only want your help always?
Wow. Do you work at my library? This actually happens quite often. Um, it's something that I am still working on because it's very hard for me. I'm a people pleaser. I hate telling people no, but I'm also learning about this new thing called boundaries. Um, and just setting those boundaries, making it clear from the beginning. Um, that you cannot be accessed all the time, that you cannot be the person that they go to all the time. And sometimes I say that by saying, like, for example, hey Bob, like, I know you really like coming to me for help, but you know, Sally over here, she can help you too. And she's really nice too. And, you know, just kind of, sometimes it helps if you give that introduction to another staff member. And then depending on their experience with that staff member, hopefully they can seek them out. I also, we have a program that I've started it's called HPL Helps, and for 1 hour twice a week is where I'm available. I'm out on the floor at a table and with a laptop, and I'm just there to help whoever comes by. So if this person is coming to me at an hour that's not during the HPL Helps hour, sometimes I can say, hey, I can't help you with this right now. I'm actually busy doing something else. But what about, you know, next Thursday from 3 to 4? I can make some time then. So if you have that flexibility to be able to just kind of make a later appointment, sort of, and just let them know, oh, I'm working on stuff. I can't really help you right now. And just doing it in a nice way and trying not to ever seem annoyed, if that answers your question.
And then it happens in all settings too. I would say, you know, it happens to in university settings too. Sometimes students like attach with you and they want to see you, but not other counselors, right? But then, you know, we in a treatment relationship, we also need to have a termination. And we know that we are not going to be a fixer, right? For the customer, we cannot be the fixer for them. We cannot fix everything for them. They ultimately be the person to connect with some more resources and get, you know, help from, you know, other people as well. So it's always good to, you know, like what Dayra said, right? Set some boundaries, and it's okay to tell the customer about the things that you can or cannot do. And even though you might be there all the time, even though the customer might see you every day, seems like you're very nice and caring, but then at the same time, you also have other duties that you need to do. And it's okay to tell the customer about that. And also keep that in mind, right? Today we give you a lot of like different ways, right, to respond. And also do have some handy information in place, maybe a flyers about you know, reaching out to other resources in the community. Sometimes when you hand out something, right, to the customer, one way you feel better, right? You give something to the customer. And then on the other side, the customer might also feel like physically they receive something, even just a piece of paper, right, with some information there. And then, but then the hidden message from there is also, okay, you know, I reinforce you. You know, once again, right, there's a lot of resources available in the community, and I would encourage you to access those resources. So that would be a good way to, again, right, like set those boundaries.
Absolutely.
And Dayra, is it like there's another questions that we have?
I think that's it.
This is Derek again. I did have a question for Dayra. You had mentioned scenario 2, somehow addressing these issues through policy. Could you elaborate at all on that?
Oh, sure. Just that it's helpful to have a policy in place. For example, if this situation was going on and I didn't have a policy in place, then I would be frantically Googling a crisis intervention team phone number, trying to find that, trying to think, oh, who do I have to get permission to call? Do I have to let my supervisor know what's going on first before I do anything? Is this something that security is supposed to be handling? So just having some very clear guidelines about how to at least approach the situation is what I meant by that.
Okay, thank you so much, Dayra and Agnes. That was a wonderful session. We very much appreciate you participating in our virtual forum too today. Derek, thank you for monitoring chat. Connie, thank you for helping with promoting this event today. I couldn't have done it without you. And thank you all for attending today's session. We're including a survey to today's presentation in your chat window. If you could provide us a little bit of feedback, we would love it. And just a reminder for those of you renewing your ALA membership, we encourage you to select Access Services Interest Group as a community member. When the interest group applies to renew its status with ACRL, ACRL considers the number of members in the interest group when making its decision to continue a group. We hope to see some of you at ALA Midwinter, where we'll meet on Saturday, January 25th from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. And for those not attending, we hope you can join us virtually via Skype. Thank you everyone for today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.